Looks like we are about set there. So thank you. Welcome to what is this? I think our fourth, maybe third Lunch and Learn Apprenticeship webinar series. I am Richard Lawrence, Senior Director, Workforce Team at IREC, the Interstate Renewable Energy Council. Today we have my colleague here, Susan Bizuski-Eber, discussing, along with our colleague at IWSI America, Mr. William Krause, discussing the language of apprenticeships. So we're getting a little deeper into things now. And if you go to the next slide here, Bill. And there's their beautiful pictures. So you'll see their lovely faces next. Go ahead, next slide. And I do just want to welcome everybody to our session here again. Make sure to know that closed captioning is enabled if you do need that support or just want to read the text. Go ahead and click on that on the bottom of your screen. You should see the options for those closed captions. We are keeping all participants on mute in order to maintain the flow of the presentation, but please use the Q&A tab down at the bottom to submit any questions. The chat function is also enabled, so you may communicate there, but and we'll try to monitor that for questions as well. But if you can keep your questions in the Q&A and your chats in the chat, that would be great. IREC has a policy to not allow AI bots on, AI note takers and recorders for our presentations. So we will be, if there are any note takers that have joined, we will be kicking those out of the session today. Thank you for your understanding with that. But you will receive a recording, everybody who's registered here, and the recordings are actually published afterwards. It takes us sometime in the next week. We will get that back to you, along with a glossary of terms of a lot of the topics that we'll be talking about today. We'll have that all summarized for you in a document as well to reference. So we're just finishing that up. We'll have that out to you next week. Okay, next slide. Do have to put this funding statement and disclaimer on this presentation, as this work that we are doing has been funded by both the U.S. Department of Energy's Solar Ready Vets project and a contract that we have with the U.S. Department of Labor to serve as an industry intermediary for the clean energy industry. So you can read that disclaimer. I will not go through it all, but we do not represent the views of the government with this presentation, and any references we have to any other companies or things like that should not be construed as endorsements. Go ahead, next slide. So again, this is a continuation of our monthly webinar series where we are educating people on the value of apprenticeships, all the details about apprenticeships and how to run those. And join us next month. All of the series is available for registration now. So go ahead and log on to that site if you haven't already. Sign up for the ongoing events, and you can register for those. Next month, we will be discussing the program standards that are the framework that really define what the apprenticeship program is about and what the apprentices will be learning as they go through that, what all the requirements are, and learn more about that next month. Okay, next slide. As I said, we are a contractor to the Department of Labor as an intermediary to help bridge the gap between the government and those private entities, employers, and training programs and such that are engaged in apprenticeships in the clean energy industry. And we are working, IREC is the lead contractor, but have formed the Apprenticeships in Clean Energy, or ACE network. And that is a coalition of multiple organizations that are all here to serve you and help understand and navigate this apprenticeship process. We've got some trade associations we're focused on, kind of the solar and storage energy industries with SEIA, and energy efficiency sector with the Building Performance Association. We've got recruitment partners like the Service Year Alliance and some of the community colleges available through our networks, as well as the HBCUs and colleges and universities that are out there. We've got good technical support from IWSI America. You'll hear from Mr. Krause today. And, just lots of support. You have connections to the workforce boards in your area to get additional support. And we're here to help. Go ahead and next slide. So the ACE network, what we do is a lot of outreach and engagement like this webinar here. This kind of gets into the technical assistance as well. We're available for one-on-one technical assistance to help understand and navigate the registered apprenticeship system, expand existing programs into new occupations, make connections and partnerships to training programs and recruitment partners to deliver quality training, get qualified candidates. And we do also have some financial assistance that's available. So up to $1,000 per apprentice, capped at $40,000 per employer. And you can visit our website there for more information about that. Go ahead, next slide. And I do want to highlight one of the technical assistance resources that we did just release. And this dovetails into our next month's presentation as well on standards. We did just create, got approval for, I should say, a national guideline standard, which serves as a framework, a template for programs to develop and train people in the occupation of construction craft laborer. This is an occupation that can do a lot of work on a wide variety of construction projects and assist, the other skilled trades like the electricians. And we are also working on some of those other trades like electrician right now to make sure that solar installation companies can fully train all of these occupations through the work that they're doing. So I encourage you to take a look at that. It also comes with a little bit of guide on how to use the guideline standards. And of course, we are available. Our team is available to help you implement that standard and register it locally. We just put a link to that standard in the chat. Thank you, Avery. All right, and next slide. I think that's pass it on to Bill and Susan for the rest. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good morning, everyone. We thank you so much for joining. We're close to 100 participants right now, and that's phenomenal. Thank you for that. Today's agenda is a little different than most. This is more of the decoding type of agenda. As you see, we're going to be talking about the language of apprenticeship. Many times, individuals, both in industry and in the apprenticeship world, use terminology that we take for granted that everybody understands and everybody knows. And in fact, they really don't. Many times you'll get the nodding heads and you'll say, okay, we're all set with that. But in fact, we don't have the knowledge to know what really is going on. So what we're going to try to do today with Susan and myself is to go through some of the language of apprenticeship, speak a little bit about the language of industry and business. We're going to do a little presentation, Susan and myself, where we will assume roles and we will kind of emphasize how the message gets lost on both sides of the equation. And then we're going to talk a little bit about building the skilled workforce through clear communication. And that's communication going up the chain, down the chain, and across to government, schools, and other individuals and companies that are involved in apprenticeship. So I'm going to turn it to Susan. We're going to go back and forth quite often so you don't get bored with my voice. You'll never get bored with Susan's, but mine you will. So let's go to Susan.
Thanks, Bill. Welcome, everyone. Glad to be here today to talk about communication, which is like one of my favorite topics to talk about. So, the problem, business speak as a barrier. So businesses, government, education, workforce boards all have their own language. And for those who work in those areas, it becomes so ingrained that it's intuitive. We don't even realize that what someone else doesn't know that's not coming from an area that's different from ours. And I'm sure even among your colleagues in your own whatever workspace you're in, acronyms are tossed about. For the outsider, it seems like a completely different language, and this can create a barrier to communication. I'll give you an example of one that happened to me not too long ago. I've been at IREC since the beginning of November, and on this contract as an intermediary, we work with Salesforce, and I'm comfortable and understand Salesforce, having worked with it when I was with the OA as a consultant last year. And I understood Active Campaign in Salesforce. Well, here I am in a meeting with my colleagues working on another piece of a project, and they kept using the word Active Campaigns. And I must confess, for about 3 meetings, I was thinking, are they connected to Salesforce? Until finally I said, can you explain what you mean by active campaigns? It's completely different. It's a platform. But it just goes to show you that a one word to somebody can mean something completely different in another context. So where this can become, let's drill down to how it becomes applicable in the workplace for apprenticeships, is research typically tells us it takes anyone from 3 months to a year to really become effective in their position and productive in their jobs. And that's one of the reasons why registered apprenticeship programs is such a great model. Decoding business or industry language can help fast forward new hires through this journey and make them a much more productive employee. Again, someone who's been on the job for a year, there's intuitive language. They know the culture of the company. They know how these terms are used. Someone coming on board does not. So that's where apprenticeships can help. But it's just something to keep in mind, how business and industry speak can be a barrier. Business speak isn't very direct. Often lots of buzzwords. Sometimes these make it into the word of the year, but you'll hear things like touch base, put a pin in it, moving it forward, red flag that one. But it's also, a lot of their language is also related to revenue or marketing. So things like bottom line, value added, leveraging resources, which, by the way, in business always includes human resources. So whether they're selling a product or service or providing a service, they also have those resources. But on the other hand, they do consider their workforce their actual resource as well. And now to Bill to talk about the language of apprenticeship.
Susan, you used the word or the acronym OA. That's 50-cent penalty for you. So you can see, if individuals don't know what an OA is, you couldn't even figure out what was going on. So I think part of it is to be mindful of your actual discussion and what you're trying to get across. Apprenticeship, as many of you know, is based on law. It's based on regulations, uh, circulars, bulletins, and very, very exact types of wording. And that's there because when you deal with programs that are administered by the government, they are prone to be dissected by many. So you want to be as exact as possible when you are speaking about these programs. And the other part is that it's very important that you have consistency of what the definitions mean across the different states, across the different occupations. And any kind of ambiguity really leads to confusion. And I almost want to say that in many times when there's a discussion between industry and government or industry and other organizations, it's like having a radio communication on two different frequencies. And it's very difficult to hear and talk at the same time. And it's even more difficult when they're speaking a foreign language and you don't have the knowledge. So, our goal here is to teach you, or to expose you to, is a better way, to the language of apprenticeship, know where to go to learn about that, have your little decoder ring with you when you're going through the discussions with the apprenticeship advocates, the different apprenticeship agencies, so you'll know what they're talking about. And very importantly is you'll be in a better place to access benefits. If you don't know what a WIOA is, you say, I don't know what it is, but I sure want one of them. And the reality of it is, if you know what a WIOA is, and we're going to talk about that a little bit, you will be more equipped to know what you want to do next. So it's kind of like decoding where we are. We want to make apprenticeship into a very clear communication device. The feedback in apprenticeship is really important. And feedback comes from all your partners. It comes from your apprentices. It comes from your schools. It comes from your bosses. It comes from industry. It comes from the public. And it's very important to be exact. It's very important to talk about the things you're looking for and to be able to ask for those elements. And because a lot of it is hands-on learning, you'll be surprised how industry's wording for it and the wording that is used from the apprenticeship, uh, I would say the advocates or the apprenticeship agencies, is sometimes very confusing. And we do not want you to stand there and just nod your head, because that's not going to get the results that you deserve and you need. So we're going to go into a little bit of decoding with you. We're going to go into the sources, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to get involved in the discussion and how to check your own wording on elements. Susan?
All right. So, as Bill pointed out, there's a lot of administrative wording, like the bulletins and the Tegels, and these are sort of
Uh-oh.
those. Oh, did I
T-Goals.
mention? Well,
Oh.
the Tegels. But these are, you didn't say Tegel, I'll say it. But these are documents that sort of overall are policy driven. But I think if you're going to establish a program and if you're trying to decode, the much more practical approach, first and foremost, is to really understand the key elements of apprenticeship language as they apply to the actual apprenticeship. Apprenticeship language, as it applies to the actual doing of an apprenticeship, the performing of an apprenticeship, is very much almost education based, because it's a learning experience. And what a program standards and what the plan is to really describe what that learning experience is about. So it's going to be a lot about mastery, learning a skill. It's going to be very action oriented, very hands on, which is one of the reasons why I think apprenticeships are becoming so popular, in that, instead of going and getting a 4-year college degree and not participating in any kind of work-based learning, you just go out into the field. You have to then think back and apply that theory as it pertains to the job you're doing. But in apprenticeship, it's locked together. So you've got that learning process is very fluid. It incorporates both the on-the-job learning as well as the classroom learning, or however the related instruction, which is the theory that applies, is being taught, and how it applies. So it's very measurable outcomes, which again is an educational term. Defining clear benchmarks in terms of competency, again, very much an educational term. I think where we start to get a little bit more into the root of how apprenticeship works is, as Bill mentioned, is that feedback. So because of the way that it's set up with a mentor or journey worker, if you will, there's that direct relationship of someone showing somebody hands-on how to do something. And that gives the ability to be able to say, let me show you how to do it, right? Let me watch you do it, and then let me provide feedback. So very much that demonstration, observation, and then I think it's important also to remember that as somebody is learning a task, there's also a progressive skill development. So the way that the plan is developed is that they're actually stepping into the next task up. So it's very linear in terms of you learn this and then you learn this. There was a time I remember talking to one of my colleagues and we were talking about this at one point, and a young man went into an apprenticeship program, and it was, I think it was an electrician, but he was learning how he had to go and divide things up, unwind wires, put them in different places, and he had to do that for 2 weeks. And at one point he was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. This isn't what I signed up for. Until someone stepped in and explained this is a process. You have to learn how to do this, and then you go to the next step once you show competency in this. So it made sense because there's also that ability to be able to explain to the apprentice, here's the steps you're going to go through. It's sort of, and I guess in academic terms, this is the syllabus. This is how you're going to go through this. So many of you have remember this, getting the syllabi in various classes in school would recall that you had these specific tasks. And again, the other piece of it is that relates is that finally there's a performance evaluation. So there are performance evaluations along the way, which is also a part of that feedback other than just telling somebody and giving them that feedback. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Bill.
And it's interesting, as I'm looking at the slide, and I'm sure the folks who are looking at it also will say, gee, there's no apprenticeship words in there. And that's done intentionally because when we look at measurable outcomes, we're looking at completion of work processes, something that we have yet to define on this call. But there's also direct feedback. And that direct feedback is when you're speaking to your apprentices, so they know exactly where they are in their program. And when they speak to you saying, hey, I'm not getting the proper training that I'm supposed to be getting. And they're communicating with you and you're communicating with them at the language you both understand. And that's really important. Everyone on this call, besides me, is probably a very technical person who, when they're using a tape measure, you don't say 3 little dashes after the big dash, because that doesn't really help you when it comes to accuracy and completeness. So what we're striving for here is to ask everyone to become a little more aware of the way they're communicating to the different parties associated in your current discussions. It could be government, it could be school, it could be IREC, it could be anyone. So that's what we want to do there. Now, I wish I had a translator ring that I could translate things. And many of us throw terms out there, and this is just a few. I'm a supervisor here. No, for the apprenticeship world, you're the journey worker. And well, then what the heck's a journey worker? A journey worker is, and I think many of you have asked us, and it's very defined what a journey worker is. An individual who's a master in their particular occupation through both related instruction or on-the-job experience, and have the ability to actually supervise and to train individuals. And that's important because journey worker comes up all the time. Who makes a journey worker? How do you get one of them? I'll take two. Well, journey work is something that you are going to grow. You're going to appoint these journey workers based on their knowledge, their skills, and their experience. But like the other words here, well, Susan, you've done a good job. We're going to give you a pay raise. Well, just kidding, Susan, you're not getting a pay raise. But in the reality of it is, in apprenticeship, we call it a wage increment because there are requirements in the regulations which say during an apprenticeship program, an individual will receive an increment, and that increment does so many good things. Going back to predictability, if someone knows they're going to be getting a wage increment or an increase in 6 months, 12 months, whatever it may be, it's a great incentive for retention. It's a great way to hold on to people, knowing that if they do a good job and they follow the rules and they learn, they'll get an increase. So there's different elements here that do work. Hey, you're going to go do some work experience. Well, in the apprenticeship world, they call it on-the-job learning. It used to be called on-the-job training, but now it's on-the-job learning. So, there's terms that you need to figure out what they mean. And supervision, and we always talk about ratios. I know Richard talks about ratios a lot, and it's really important because it's not just, well, we got old Joe out there and he's keeping an eye on people. Well, there are ratios that are really identified, and ratios are those types of things which ensure safety, training, and continuum of employment. So there's some really great things that are very defined in the apprenticeship regulations and in the law and in their practice. But so you have to kind of take where you are and put it into the apprenticeship language. And at the same time, when you are cognizant of that, the folks on the other side, the receiver or the transmitter of the apprenticeship part, starts realizing they need to also communicate at a common frequency, a common language. So it's important to understand that there are differences, but the similarities are great. We want to get you on the same channel. That's our goal. Susan?
Okay, implementing the language of apprenticeship. So consciously choose the words. As Bill was saying, if you look at, and as Bill pointed out when I said OA in the first slide, thinking about when you throw an acronym out there, when you are in a meeting, I pointed out, the term that I was confused by in my position, but really thinking about how can you move things towards more plain language, more language that's direct, that really makes sense. I think it's really important. I know that we talked a little bit about the policy documents that apply to registered apprenticeship programs. And one of the pieces I think that is important is 29 CFR 29. And if anyone has ever opened up a document like that, have your caffeine with you. I mean, it is a thick document to go through, but I think that it is something that is important to know. So I think, it's a good test to kind of go through that document and learn how to break those phrases and things down, learn how to connect them, understand that what the rules and regulations are out there. And if you ever have any questions about those rules and regulations, IREC as an intermediary is more than happy to have that conversation with you. If you are looking at the document, the CFR document, and say, what do they mean by this? Give us a call. We'll be more than happy. Pull it up. We'll explain it in detail. It's a little bit long to go through in a webinar, but I definitely would recommend taking a look at that. So why is the work process so important is because it's detailed.
Mm-hmm.
It provides consistency. So, you might be hiring 5 people in the next year, 10 people in the next year, and maybe you're bringing them in at different time increments. So you're bringing somebody the beginning of February, somebody the beginning of March. If you don't have a detailed plan on how that works, and that's what apprenticeship does, there's always a chance you're going to miss something, to miss one particular detail. So those work processes, the details in those work processes are really important. I know that I've worked with employers that we've taken that document and actually moved it to a Word document with checkboxes so that it made it easier. Also worked with employers that took that same document with the checkboxes and sat down with the apprentice and showed them exactly the progression and the detail of that work process form so that they knew they weren't going to be sitting in a closet taking, shifting dock things from one basket to another and sort of doing that level of work for forever. So that's a really important, it's really important to let your apprentices know that. We're going to create a glossary, and we're going to put it together for you. I think that will help you more concretely get it. We will have that available for you. And again, I want to say, if you can get into those, if you're bored, or if you're up in a cold area and you don't have the luxury of being down in Florida like Bill and I, and you're sort of homebound, that CFR could make some interesting reading, I'm sure. But again, if you go into that and you look at it, please be sure, highlight things, contact us. We're more than happy to go over any of that. And I think it's important when you look at this apprenticeship and understanding the language of apprenticeship, if there's just one person in your company that is running this, it's important that they help others to understand it, because that apprentice is part of your employment and they're going to be running into other people, and you don't want them to be in a situation where they cannot explain what an apprenticeship is, but also the person that they're talking to can't receive that and understand what they're doing. So I think it's important to really, if you're going to shift, and I always call registered apprenticeships our cultural shift in any organization, that it is a cultural shift for the whole organization. So everybody's on the same time there, and they all understand what exactly it is that needs to be and what is being said. So becomes a common language at that. Did I leave anything out, Bill?
No, I do want to jump to Richard for a moment, because you mentioned something that's really important, Susan, is about the work process. And the work process is, of course, an apprenticeship term, but in the reality, it's your training plan. And that training plan is comprised of both the tasks and the skills that an individual will achieve and attain, in addition to the technical instruction that they will receive while they're at a formalized training, such as a school, or individualized training at the facility. So, Richard, do you want to go into the work process a little bit? Oh, there he is.
Yeah, happy to
Thank you.
jump in here. There's the work process, and we'll get into this actually a lot more, I think, on our next month's webinar. But it fits into the language conversation here, is when crafting the your program standards, which include that work process schedule that says this is what the apprentice is supposed to learn on the job, and then the related instruction as well, which shows the coursework that they're supposed to take in addition to their on-the-job learning. The way that the language that's used in crafting those, that program standard that defines those requirements is really important. You need to pay attention when crafting. Again, the language that says, here is what the apprentice needs to learn. Here's the tasks they need to be able to do. Here's the classes they need to take. Because that that language then defines, what every participant in that program needs to complete. It also defines then really what that apprentice knows at the end of it. So, they're all based around an occupation. We're supposed to have a common understanding of what that occupation means. But depending on how the language that's used in framing the standards will create more flexibility for you in those apprentices and the tasks that they're able to do as part of their work and the training they get, or it can be much more restrictive and proscriptive in terms of exactly when and what needs to be learned. So it's important to pay attention to that and make sure that it's flexible enough that it meets your needs and it actually really does align with the tasks that they are going to be doing in the field. So, thanks.
Great. Thank you, Richard. You've been listening to us talk about the language of apprenticeship, but Susan and myself, we've both been through the apprenticeship ringer many, many times, and we thought that it would be more helpful to kind of do a scenario and a role playing. And we want folks to listen to the role playing and see if any of this is familiar to you in both the way you've listened or the way you've actually portrayed yourself. So in this particular situation, Miss Eber, we'll use a formal name, is a business owner. And good old Bill is the apprenticeship advocate or the registration agency, whatever. So this is our first meeting and we're getting together. I've never met Miss Eber before and she really doesn't know anything about apprenticeship. So listen on. It's only a few minutes long and I think you'll enjoy it. And at the end, we'll have some questions. Miss Eber, thank you for your time. I'm here to talk about how apprenticeships can be a game changer for your workforce development strategy, especially given the current skills gap in manufacturing. Think of it as a talent pipeline built specifically for your company's needs.
Apprenticeships, talent pipeline. I heard those buzzwords, but honestly, at this point in time, I'm not entirely clear what you're talking about. It sounds, I don't know, outdated, old-fashioned. I think my father was an apprentice, or my grandfather. We're dealing with advanced manufacturing techniques like CNC machining and automation. We need people that are familiar with PLCs, HMIs, and ideally some exposure to IIoT.
No, Miss Eber, not at all. Modern apprenticeships are a cutting-edge workforce solution, perfectly suited for today's high-tech environment. They combine structured OJL with RTI, often incorporating online training platforms, simulations, and even VR training to develop highly skilled journey workers. It's a true earn while you learn model, benefiting both the apprentice and your business.
So I think what I hear you saying is that I get to train someone my way from the ground up, from the moment they walk in without any experience, following some kind of a competency-based approach, even for specialized roles like PLC programmers or robotics technicians who understand things like OPC UA.
Exactly, you got it.
Oh,
You're actively involved in shaping their skills, ensuring they meet your requirements, including familiarity with Industry 4.0 technology and concepts like AM. Think of it as customized work-based learning. And it's not about technical skills. Apprenticeship also instill crucial employability skills like work ethics, teamwork, problem solving, like soft skills.
Okay. But what about the ROI? I mean, training for these high skill positions can be a significant investment, cost my company money, especially when you factor in things like TCO.
Wow. Did I lose you?
No, can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you. Yeah. Okay. That's where the strategic advantage of apprenticeship shines. Many programs leverage funding opportunities, sometimes through state and federal grants like WIOA funding, or even specialized apprenticeship grants like those focused on AM or STEM fields. Plus, apprentices are productive from day one, contributing to your team while they're gaining valuable experience. They're earning while they learn, increasing their buy-in and retention.
It's interesting. Well, I'm kind of curious, what kind of apprenticeships are available? I run a manufacturing plant with a need for skilled maintenance mechanics, CNC machinists, and automated technicians familiar with PLCs, HMIs, and
Mm,
ideally, someone with exposure to SCADA systems.
mm, plenty. We have registered apprenticeship programs for all those roles and more. We work with local community colleges and technical schools. And with the LWDBs, we partner with them for customized alignment and industry recognized standards, including groups like NIMS, MSSC, and even specific training like AWS. This leads to a portable national credential, a valuable asset to your employee and a benchmark of quality for your company.
Hmm. I know in your email you mentioned that I get a skilled journey worker, potentially some financial assistance, and then a kind of a recognized credential, maybe even some certifications like OSHA 10 or other certs. So, what's the catch? Is there some kind of NDA I need to sign?
Oh, no, 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 no catch. We're in the government. There's no catch. It's about developing your highly skilled talent pool and closing that skills gap. We handle the administrative burden, connect you with qualified candidates, and provide ongoing support throughout the apprenticeship cycle. Think of us as your intermediary, facilitating the process. And of course, there's no NDA required.
All right, let me give it some thought. I'm
Mm.
very curious. Tell me more about the apprenticeship agreement. And then I'm assuming there's kind of a registration process with a state as an SAA or how it aligns with the Department of Labor.
It's pretty straightforward. We start with an analysis and a skills assessment, an SA, to determine your specific needs, including KSAs, and then work with you to develop a robust training plan, which becomes a work process, outlining the required competencies and incorporating elements of lean manufacturing, Kaizen principles, and other relevant methodologies. We'll help you register your program with the SAA and then connect or connect you with potential apprentices through the talent network, often utilizing tools like online job boards, veterans focused recruitment, CTEs, and VOTEC.
So how long does this take? How long is an apprenticeship? How long does it last? Because I need
It,
workforce. I got to get people going here.
it, it all depends on the occupation, but most occupations are between 1 and 5 years. Think of it as a long term investment in your human capital. Upon successful completion, the apprenticeship earns a nationally recognized completion certificate and becomes a journey worker, ready to contribute at a high level, potentially even pursuing further certifications like Six Sigma, Green Belt, or even something like CompTIA A plus if it's relevant to their role. Miss Eber, that's what it does.
Huh. Well, Bill, you make some good points there, and you've given me a lot to think about. I know where we need to go. I tell you what, send me some information on the manufacturing apprenticeships, and then maybe give me some details on like how this framework goes, and then a connection to the national system, I guess, with the Department of Labor. And yeah, let's circle back
Mhm.
and schedule a follow-up meeting.
Well, I'll send you a few Form 671s in addition to an employer acceptance agreement. Further, I'll probably send you a draft set of program standards, an Appendix B and Appendix C. And I think those documents will give you a clear a clear picture of what needs to be done. Um, Everything is pretty self-explanatory. We strive to have clarity in our communications and to make sure that we're speaking the language of business. So we'll send you those 671s. We'll connect you with the local workforce boards to do WIOA. There's even TJTC programs out there. We connect you with the VA and other programs so we can work together to benefit you and your apprentices. Thank you for coming in, and we'll talk shortly. Okay.
Yikes. That was a lot of acronyms.
Oh, me tell
Schedule the
you.
meeting for 4 weeks from today. I need.
Yeah, yeah, right. So, what we tried to show you, and I don't know if it came across, but we tried to show you that I'm speaking my language and Susan's speaking her language. And every once in a while, we do get some areas of commonality. However, a lot of the things that the apprenticeship advocate myself speaks about are kind of lost because the individual receiving the message doesn't understand what a WIOA is or what a work process is or what a journey worker is. So, I say from the apprenticeship person point of view, you as the business person needs to hold them accountable. You need to say to them, what does that mean? I don't get it. Explain to it again. What's a CTE? And you'll be surprised. People throw around acronyms and abbreviations and all kinds of stuff, and they don't have a clue what it is. And, Susan is, as in this case here, the business person, and she rattled off all kinds of things that, I just kind of zipped right past them because I didn't know what they meant, so I figured, I'll try to control the conversation. So the question is now, what kind of conversation do we had? Is it going to be successful? Do you think it worked? Susan?
Yeah, I mean, is reading through the script that you developed, Bill. I have to admit, even I had to
Hmm.
look up a few of a few of those terms, but it is very clear if you could, stepping back and hear yourself speaking with employers, that you kind of keep that in the back of your mind. My role as an employer in this was I gotta get workforce. I gotta get trained people, and that's what's important to me. Um, so yeah, we need to keep it there. Um, so the benefits of having that clear communication is going to help that employer create a skilled and efficient workforce. So by translating that, um, it's going to help that employer. It's going to help you to sell registered apprenticeships, but also to help them do what he needs to do, and that is, or she needs to do, and that is to create a productive, efficient workforce. It also benefits the community. So the clear language is so important, and it creates, as I said before, a culture shift, getting everybody
Hmm.
on the same page. Yeah.
And I would say take nothing for granted. Um, the people who are the registration agencies and the schools, they need to learn from you. You are the employer, you're the one who's driving this process. They need to understand your language. And, If you're using terms that are very industry focused or very industry specific, define it. Let them know what it means. And that will benefit you tremendously. And understand the words they use. When you get the glossary that we put together, go through it. We put in terms from Public Work. We put in terms from WIOA, Workforce Innovations Opportunity Act. We put in some wording from Wage and Hour, IRA, and also, of course, apprenticeship. So read through that, and we welcome you to kind of learn from that and just keep it in your hip pocket. So when you're being told something, you have a better understanding how it applies to you.
Yeah.
By adopting this clear and practical language of apprenticeship, you can create a much more effective and supportive environment of work, from the apprentice to your CEO, from the school to the registration agency, from your community to your political leaders. Let everybody understand what you're doing. The better interface will benefit everyone. You'll be able to access more than you even expected. When you talk to someone, you say, hey, I need to get to the VA because I want to get the housing allowance. Know what they are, know what BAH is, know the terms. If you need help with that, we'll be glad to help you, but we're going to make it as easy as possible. So, Susan, you want to finish the last comment?
So I just want to say, I think it's important. Communication is important and critical in all areas of our lives, obviously. But when it comes to workforce and when it comes to wanting to create a better workforce from the employer's point of view, from the community's point of view, those folks that really want to find work that they can do and do well, because I believe everybody wants to get up and do a good job. Nobody gets up and says, how can I be bad at my job today? But I think understanding the language of apprenticeships, but also the language of business, if you're not a business person, understanding the language of workforce boards and government only adds to your breadth of knowledge. So it's almost like adding languages, in addition to English, can maybe speak some Spanish or some French or some Arabic. So it does add to your breadth of knowledge, and it allows you to almost code switch. So it really, I think, solidifies relationships. So you can have good relationships and get what you need from workforce boards, from government, from your employees. So all around having good communication, and especially in this very important field of creating a better workforce, is good. So encourage you to actively use the language. Again, if there's any terms or abbreviation that aren't explained or don't make sense, please let us know. And of course, we will have a glossary available for you in the future. So thank you all.
Great. And am I turning this back to Richard or to Avery?
Yeah, we've got we'll have a few minutes for Q&A here. Couple of questions that has come in. First one is, can apprenticeships only be used by labor unions? Bill?
Apprenticeship is for every employer. Every employer who is working in a skilled occupation, they can use it. It doesn't matter on the size of the organization or the business. It doesn't matter if they're unionized or not. They just have to be willing to make a commitment to training their future workforce.
I've worked with small enough programs that hired one person like every 3 years. Very small company.
And questions about the language of apprenticeships and sort of relationship to the language of workforce development in general.
Right.
I'm trying to see if there's actual question here, but similar language as workforce, so durable skills is now versus soft skills and things like that.
I can go into that just a slight bit. the language of workforce is changing, and it's constantly changing. Uh, at one time, it was soft skills, then durable skills, and it changes. So we change with it. Some of the glossary terms that you'll see are in statute or they're in regulation. So those are kind of fixed. If you look at the Workforce Innovations Opportunity Act or any of the other workforce programs, they also have definitions. So in many cases, we may call the same thing three different names. But I think if you have an understanding of a workforce, where you want to go, the elements of training, the sources of funding, and who your advocates and who your government officials are, I think you will succeed. Um, Susan's been on the other side of that coin also with the community colleges, so she could pick up on that a little bit more.
And
Typing
also,
in response to somebody.
yeah, Susan, you
Well,
may be able to take that because it feeds off, I think, what Bill was saying, it kind of, these other questions here too around the different um you said, Bill, we might be using this, three different words to mean terms to mean the same thing, and there
Right,
does seem to be some questions around the definition of quote on the job learning or quote on the job training or
right.
quote what so the apprenticeship system has a definition, a term that is used for that. But it
Hmm.
is, very similar, I think, to the other terms that are used. The apprenticeship system just puts that in a formal, all right, here's what you learn on the job, and it separates that from the related instruction that's completed in a classroom. But if you want to just, what's the terms that
Yeah,
are used
yeah.
there for that on the job learning? And
but
That's real. Oh, I'm sorry, Susan. Go ahead.
yeah, I want to say in terms of education, so it does have a different term. Registered apprenticeship are paid hired people. So some work-based learning isn't always paid. Um, for instance, internships, fellowships. So education often will use internships for work-based learning, but it may not be paid. It might just be that they're getting credit. So that is the difference with a registered apprenticeship. It is an actual job that you are being paid for, and
Hmm.
you are in a regular program.
Yeah. And I think the important part, and you raised a good point about OJT, OJL, and so on. I think you need to use the terminology in the program area that you are working in. So if you're working in registered apprenticeship, no, it's called OJL. If you're working with WI Workforce Innovations Opportunity Act monies, they may use OJT because OJT allows them to pay for wages for skill upgrading. So it's a different concept. So we've tried to include many of those. I think just asking that question means that you understand exactly where we're going with this whole webinar, is that there is an interesting language out there, and I'll even use a common word, and there's dialects to this language. So you need to pick up the little pieces too.
And I know we're at top of the hour. Just want to run through.
Mm.
I'll just run quick through a couple other comments in the chat that I've seen. Another reference to, it seems that labor unions, kind of own the word
Mhm.
apprenticeships. We do believe that is a myth that is out there, as Bill spoke about earlier. Definitely, obviously a lot of the trades are done through unions, but there are over 1,000 occupations that can be taught through an apprenticeship program. And many of those, do not have unions with them. And even if they are represented by unions, almost all instances, others, colleges, employers, consortiums, trade associations can also
Mhm.
run apprenticeships programs for those same occupations. So do want to make that clear. There's also a statement about specialized apprenticeships in certain trades needing classroom training and field training, combination of those two. Those two things are needed for any apprenticeship, whether it's a specialized training or not. in a sort of a focused area where you're saying they might need some classroom. Every apprentice needs that theory, needs that classroom in whatever occupation they're learning. There's going to be theory, there's going to be classroom training they're going to have to take, and they apply it then on the job in their learning. There's also a question about sort of how long does it take, or when does an apprentice become a sort of full worker, or quote, that journey person. And I just want to say that's very quickly, that is determined by the program itself. Certain occupations take longer to learn. Other occupations can be learned more quickly. And that program standard defines sort of how long it takes. If it's a time-based program, you can also have programs that are based on a measurement of the competencies. So it may take a person a little bit longer or shorter to demonstrate that they're fully proficient. So thank you for all these great questions. Thank you for in your participation in this webinar. Like I said, we will post this. Bill, you want to quick to the next slide, and then we'll wrap it up. Again, next month's webinar will be on our developing the apprenticeship standards, and we'll dive more into those last couple questions there a little bit more. Those standards really define how long it's going to take, what they need to do on the job, what they need to do in the classroom to be able to complete the apprenticeship and become a journey person. So we look forward to seeing you there, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great and beautiful day.
Mm-hmm.